And if one country wants to do it alone, that will be a failure. Time was considered as unstable.
So, Secretary General, the January 2009 crisis was an unprecedented event. What was the role of the ECT in the crisis?
Well, the ECT, being the only legally binding treaty that we have in the field of energy, could not stay idle. So we did what we could. We saw the crisis coming already in December, and we had a warning shot, if I may say so, just before Christmas. Then after the holiday recess, we again recalled the parties, the Ukraine and Russia, about their obligation according to the treaty. We offered also conciliation mechanism, and finally we offered to include one expert from the Energy Charter Treaty in the monitoring mission, which was sent to Ukraine later in the crisis. So that is what really we did during that. Of course, we drew conclusions on our role and our possible improvement. Obviously, the main problem is that we don't have an emergency mechanism, and we as Secretariat could not initiate a procedure of conciliation or arbitration. But certainly the main thing is that we don't have an emergency mechanism. And we have drawn that conclusion, and we have put on our website for the next meeting of the Energy Charter Treaty a possible topic that could be discussed in establishing such a mechanism.
The dispute was the occasion for questioning the treaty and its relevance, particularly in terms of emergencies. In your statements, you've been clear that the treaty remains the cornerstone of energy governance in Eurasia, and its principles remain unchallenged. But is there a scope for modernising the treaty, and if so, what do you have in mind here?
We certainly see a scope for modernising the treaty, also for the reason that a treaty was negotiated almost 20 years ago between Soviet Union and European Union, and the world has changed. Russia has changed, EU has changed, and energy has changed. So we think that there is a need to modernize the treaty, and we are prepared to do it. But certainly the main principle of the treaty are not challenged. The protection of investment is needed, the sovereignty of energy resources are guaranteed and need to be guaranteed, and certainly the choice of economic policy is also guaranteed by the treaty, and these are principles that cannot be touched. And we are certain that no one among our member states want to touch that. That doesn't mean that we cannot improve the treaty, because if I'm listening to the Russian statement, for instance, they say, rightfully, that we need more than what it is in the treaty for the moment. And what could that more be? There are many more that we can have. So the first thing, I think, is to have an energy mechanism, an emergency mechanism in the field of energy. And certainly that mechanism must have three functions, and we summarize it in the 3Ds. We need to deter crisis, we need to detect crisis, and we need to diffuse crisis. And that could be done by a monitoring system in the sense, a bit in the same spirit as what we have seen late in the crisis. That was probably too little and too late, but certainly it was a step in the right direction.
Negotiations in respect of the draft transit protocol have reached a crucial phase. Do you think now there's a realistic prospect of finalising the protocol in the near future, and what needs to be done for the member states to conclude this?
You know, I have to be prudent because my predecessors in the time were already optimistic about finalizing the transit protocol. So that means 5 years ago. So I would say that certainly we have made very, very good progress. But it still remains that we have one big issue that needs to be solved, is the question of, is there transit within the market of the EU? That is the famous Rio clause, regional organization. I think that there is a way to bypass this problem. But that must be agreed by all parties. And I would say that for the moment, the ball is in the EU court. I think that Russia has made quite a few compromises, and I'm certain that within the EU there is an active discussion on the subject. I think we have a reasonable prospect, and certainly the crisis has been a shock for everybody. And maybe that will encourage people in the Commission to see what they can do. But of course, politics is everywhere in the field of energy. We will have a new Commission. Will this Commission make a difficult decision now? That remains to be seen. But certainly the political aspect of the crisis cannot be underestimated.
This year the Energy Charter Treaty is undergoing a process of regular review. What's the purpose of the review and what will its main characteristics be?
But the review is certainly foreseen within the treaty. The treaty foresees that there must be a review every 5 years. We think that this is very timely now. The main purpose of the review is to see, is there still confidence in the treaty as it is now? And certainly after the crisis, an additional question is, what can we do to improve the treaty, to improve the confidence in the treaty? I think it's not a futile question, because if I look as Russia, as a main actor, Russia is not member of WTO, Russia is not member of OECD. The only international framework where Russia in the field of energy has a say, and this is a limited say because they choose not to ratify, is the Energy Charter. So there have been numerous Russian statements saying we support the principle of the Charter, but we need to improve the Charter. We are prepared to do that, and we agree with the Russians that there is a need to improve the treaty. The way to do it is certainly not to rewrite the treaty, but the way to do it is to have additional protocols, declaration, and so on. This is a normal practice in international law, and it's valid for ECT as well.
Thank you very much indeed.